Yo, what is up, everybody? Let's go back again with third story from our series, Night Terrors, written by Carol C. Roberts. Now, check out the links below, show some love to the author, like, comment, subscribe. Story 3, Gazing at the Moon. Monica stood at the picture window in the den of her home, contemplating the moon. It was so large and bright, and she found herself lost in deep thought, inspired by it. She did her best meditating while observing the huge sphere. When she wasn't homeschooling her two children, 10-year-old Jimmy, 8-year-old Gail, she spent her time cleaning their house and cooking. But she was always drawn to the large window by the glowing orb hanging in the sky. Monica and her husband of 12 years, Michael, had moved into their small house 2 years ago, along with their children and Monica's mother, Louise. At first, all had gone well for the family, but gradually, Monica noticed Louise beginning to say strange things. It was just a stray comment at first, about leaving home, the mission, but then her mother became more adamant about Monica listening to her, insisting they talk about things Monica knew nothing about. Usually, she would solve her family problems by consulting the moon. But lately, that was not the case. Her mother was sinking further and further into dementia, even though she was only in her early 50s, breaking Monica's heart. Louise had been in the military and was a strong leader, and Monica had always admired her mother. It was becoming more and more stressful seeing her mother wear uniform-like clothes, but Louise had insisted that's what she wore every day. Every morning at 7 a.m., 7 days a week, Louise emerged from her bedroom, dressed in her same uniform, and then proceeded to leave the house as if she were going for work. Monica questioned the safety of this, but Michael assured her Louise was going to a good place where she could be productive. Every evening, about 7 p.m., Louise arrived at home, tired and ready to rest. She spent all her spare time with Jimmy and Gail, and Monica noticed they were growing closer to their grandmother, even to their father. He was beginning to feel left out. All the more reason to engage in moon gazing. At Monica's instance, she and Michael took Louise to see a counselor, but that only seemed to make things worse. He was a 50-ish man with salt, pepper hair, Dr. Duncan. When they visited his office, which was very close to their house, strangely, he seemed to be interviewing Monica more than her mother, and Michael didn't seem surprised. They all seemed to be observing her rather than her demented mother. Do they think this is my fault? Monica wondered. She was beginning to feel ostracized by her own family, so she had announced she didn't think the so-called counselor was a good enough idea to continue with, to which Dr. Duncan replied, "Drop in anytime you want to talk." That was a strange thing to say, and Monica thought he should want to speak with Louise more and help her through her dementia. It really irritated Monica when Michael and Louise patiently insisted they revisit the counselor. Monica thought, I'm not the demented one here. Not being able to resolve her mother's confused thoughts, Monica had resigned herself that this was a downhill process, and all she could do was treat her mother with patience and kindness. Louise was still going to her daily work situation, and Monica hoped this would actually provide her with an outlet for her delusional thinking. So, she continued to spend her days teaching her children and taking care of their house. Sometimes she was alone in the house with Louise gone for the day, Michael gone to work, and her children outside playing. Their house had developed some strange noises. First, a low humming sound Monica heard throughout the day, but she never found a source. When she mentioned it to Michael, he asked her, "What do you think it is?" "I have no idea. It's strange." Also, she had heard beeps and bells from a long way off, maybe down the street, and Michael was no help with that either. It was when she began to hear the voices intermittently, and that began to question her own sanity. Male and female voices coming and going, talking with each other. Sometimes she thought she heard Luis's voice. It wasn't Jimmy and Gail. She could see them through the back window and heard them talking. Maybe I should go back and see that counselor. But he's supposed to be Mom's help, not mine. Another afternoon proved to be extremely disconcerting. Monica was hearing the usual voices in the house, so she went to the back window to observe Jimmy and Gail and saw that their large wooden swing slide set was gone. They were playing catch with the baseball and glove. Where'd it go? She wondered. Not surprisingly, Michael said, "We changed it, remember?" Which made no sense to her. Soon, Monica became uneasy about being alone at home, discovering more unusual noises she couldn't explain. Louise had dementia, and now she was hearing things. Could there be something wrong with the house? Something it was made of, causing delusional thinking. It seemed more and more that her whole family, her children included, were looking at her with concerned expressions. At times like these, she'd sit at the front window and look at the moon, searching for guidance. Those times sometimes turned into hours, and she would forget why she was sitting there. Soon, she was becoming dependent on her time with the moon, thinking it was her rock. When she noticed the difference in the moon, she wondered why she hadn't seen it before. It was larger. The moon doesn't get larger, she reasoned. So, she stared at it again and saw it definitely was bigger. It was not her imagination. Not by much, but enough she noticed it. Everything in her life seemed strange to her. The moon appearing larger, the sounds, everybody else's attitude, the voices. And then, with the revelation, she saw everything with clarity. Ever since they moved into the new house, these things had started one by one. The only way it could happen was if her mother and husband were working together against her. Why? She didn't know why. She was sure they were conspiring against her. Fearing something was going on with all her family members, Monica asked Michael to go for a walk with her one day. She walked a short distance from the house and then into a nearby wooded area. A cool breeze was blowing, and there were birds singing in the trees. As they walked along a flowing stream, she asked her husband, He could see differences in their family. He put his arm around her and said, "We're right here, right now. Look around us. Don't you know where we are?" "Where we are? We're taking a walk and I'm asking you about Jimmy, Gail, and Mom." Michael thought for a moment, and then he said, "Let's keep walking." This runaround talk left Monica frustrated. Now, he was sure her husband was continuing his charade of being the concerned husband. He continued after a few minutes. "Everybody's fine, and we are all well. Do you know where this trail is?" Behind the house?" Then, determined to clear Michael up, she told him, "All right, let's go back to the counselor. You, me, and Mom. Now I'm going to tell him everything. Everything. About the noises, the crazy way you talk to me, and the way Mom dresses." "Yeah, let's go see him now." "What? Without an appointment?" It'll be all right. Let's go get Mom from her work and bring her too. All this craziness has got to stop, and I want to know what the noises are." "All right, we'll be there very shortly." She resolved to tell the counselor all about Michael and Louise's confusing actions. And now that she knew what the noises were, confronted all of them at once. She'd tell them she knew they must have been planting them there to confuse her even more. Thoughts began racing through her head. Mom and Michael are working together to gaslight me. Mom's dressing weirdly and leaving every day. It all makes sense. Michael spoke into his phone, and Monica heard the counselor say, "Give me 10 minutes. She quickly said, "Let's call Mom to meet us here." "She'll be there. Maybe, I don't know, change the scenery and control panel Oceanside." Abruptly, the woodsy area morphed into rolling ocean waves and a sandy beach. Seeing the hallucination and suddenly realizing her husband had given her a mind-altering drug, the distraught woman screamed, What did you do? What did you give me? Take me to a doctor now." "Okay, all right." Control panel, end program. Abruptly after which, they weren't talking on the beach. They were standing in an empty, solid white room, with walls that flowed seamlessly to a smooth white floor, about 15 feet by 15 feet by 15 feet high. There were no more sounds of waves, crashing, or breezes or birds. No sound at all. Horrified at this sight, Monica melted to the floor and sobbed loudly. What did you give me? Help me." Holding on to his wife's shoulder as she screamed, Michael clicked the pin on his left sleeve and spoke into it. "Medical emergency, HG, room 1. Presently, the room's large double doors slid open with a whoosh, and a man in a uniform, similar to the one Louise wore, rushed in, followed by the counselor and Louise. Monica looked up at all of them, and hanging onto Michael's arm, wailed, He drugged me. I'm hallucinating." Calmly, the counselor said to everyone, "Let's start here." Sitting down on the white room floor next to shaking and crying Monica, quietly said to her, "You're in HG room 1. You started with a wood scene, and I changed it to a beach scene. Dr. Duncan smiled and said, "We're trying to orient you, Monica. You're part of it. You all are." Patiently waiting until her screaming quieted, he went on. The HG room is where we have holograms, and we can change them to whatever we want. Didn't you see the woods and then the ocean? Now it's turned off. Louise was squatting beside her trembling daughter, trying to be supportive, and the other doctor was standing alongside her, smiling pleasantly at Monica. Dr. Duncan continued to explain as Monica looked from one face to another. "Don't you remember when you first came here with Michael and your children moved into your quarters?" Quarters? Do you remember your training before we all boarded here and left on this mission? Monica was trying desperately to make sense of everything, and a bit of memory began to waft back into her confusion. She started remembering seeing uniforms like her mother's. He was still dumbfounded, and looking quickly from Michael to Dr. Duncan, said, Mom's been confused, so we took her to see you." "No, Monica, it's you who's been confused, but it'll all clear up now." Monica noticed her mother tag she was wearing said Captain Louis Abbott. Still confused, Monica looked down at the floor and muttered, Dr. Duncan began helping Monica to her feet, assisted by Michael, and said, "Go for a walk." The group stepped out to the left into a large corridor, Michael leading his wife by the hand. It surprised Monica to see the back door of her house facing out into the corridor. That's my house." "Your quarters, Dr. Duncan," assured her. Michael opened the door and they all walked in. The kitchen and den were there, and then she saw the huge picture window across the room. The moon was there, as always, and Monica walked quickly to it and gazed at it. "And it's getting bigger," she told them. And Dr. Duncan explained, "No, we're getting closer to it. It's not the Earth's moon, it's a Martian moon. We'll be there in a year." Monica's eyes widened as memories of training for life in space were returning to her mind now. She struggled to make sense of the memories, and then heard the familiar humming noise. "That's one of the sounds I've been hearing. Yeah, it's the ship's engine." Relief was reducing her panic as she remembered slowly she was on board a mammoth spaceship, the Mayflower, traveling towards Deimos, the more distant Martian moon, to try and establish a colony to be called Jamestown. She went over to the back window and it looked more familiar now, remembering they could change things in the fabricated backyard with the push of a few buttons. The memories were fitting together like a huge puzzle. The program Louise had told them about were families could travel to Deimos to colonize it, and Monica, Michael, and the kids were thrilled to be part of her mother's career. They had all gone through the training in Florida, and then, like a dream come true, boarded the 10-deck spacecraft along with 900 other colonists, staff, and set out on their 3-year mission to reach Deimos. Monica teared up when she realized her family wasn't conspiring against her, and her mother didn't have Alzheimer's disease. Hugging her mother, the captain of the Mayflower, she sobbed, I remember now. Gail and Jimmy joined the group and hugged their mother. Shipmates walked in the wide hallway and smiled affectionately at Monica and continued to remember their names and faces. As they walked through the corridor, Dr. Duncan explained, "We've gathered a lot of information about what we call Spaceheimer's syndrome. It could be set off by being involved in a mission such as this, something only a select group of applicants get to participate in. It seems to be clear. Eventually, patients experience confusion, and finally, paranoia. But it's not surprising with the big change in lifestyle. Some people just can't accept living on a spaceship, traveling through space. So, they create a more normal life to escape into. We have a few more patients who haven't cleared, but we think surely they will soon. Your case lasted 2 years." Monica stared wide-eyed at the floor, realizing her whole life for the past 2 years had been an elaborate delusion. Strolling hand in hand with her mother and husband, her children at her side, Monica felt comfortable in the now familiar surroundings. Observing Deimos in all its majestic glory through an observation window, he was thinking, "I can't wait to get there." That, ladies and gentlemen, is the end for our third story.